Hey everybody, what's up? I'm Chase. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. You all know this show. This is where I sit down with amazing humans and I do everything I can to unlock their brains to help you live your dreams in career and hobby and in life. My guest today started out on the other side of the camera as a fashion icon, moved to becoming one of the world's top fashion photographers, then landed this random deal as a photographer and judge on America's Top Model. Not random at all. All these things happen for a reason. And today, he's a thriving entrepreneur. My guest today is none other than Mr. Nigel Barker. Welcome to the show,
buddy.
Bud. Been a long time coming. Good to have you.
I appreciate it.
I'm just going to start off by saying the obvious. We're dressed the same.
No, let's be fair. You are dressed like me.
Yes, that's true. Because you, if in the classic sense, I wore better. And if you're listening to this right now,
did you hear that?
Some people are watching because you can watch this show, but a lot of people, I think, predominantly listen. And like we have the same freaking pants, and the shoes are slightly different, but only slightly.
You know, it's kind of scary. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, except for the fact that they are very comfortable.
They are. This is why I wear them. It's like my wife's like, "Oh, you're wearing sweatpants again today," because they're glorified sweatpants. Anyway,
my wife likes to say, "Oh, you think you're a soldier?"
Yes.
Like, oh, come on, soldier boy, and she takes the mickey out of me. So hey, maybe that's what it is.
We're wearing camo, and now that I couldn't. It's not the best way to start a show. I'm not going to lie, but I couldn't. For those people who are watching, like, wait a minute, they wore a uniform on the show. So it's true. We also have a very similar career path except you were sort of classic model. I was an athlete, so spent a lot of time on the other side of the camera.
I can see the guns.
Then we transitioned to photographers, and now sort of photographers plus entrepreneurs. So
yeah.
That was no way an attempt to summarize the last 30 years of your life, but in Nigel Barker's own words, how in the hell did you get to sitting right here? Give me the short version of the 30-year arc of your career.
I think, look, at the end of the day, it was about, one, believing in myself, and also having a dream, right? Dreaming about moving from England and seeing the world, originally traveling. And I grew up doing a bit of travel. I was always fascinated with it. And I think when I first started modeling, and I never wanted to model, it was not a dream of mine, actually. I kind of fell into it. Ironically, from a show called The Clothes Show in England, which was one of the very first modeling competitions in the 80s, right? And I didn't win, and I got a top 3, and someone said to me, "Oh, would you like a modeling contract?" And I thought, okay, in my year off between high school and college,
yeah.
I would do a bit of modeling. Yeah, gap year.
There we go.
Exactly.
Proper British term.
Proper British term. I was trying to Americanize it for you.
Yeah.
But I did a bit of modeling. It went well. And the first thing that really struck me was just how interesting people in fashion are. Right? Yeah. I'd come from a very straight-laced boarding school, private school, English education system, all boys schools and things like that. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I was in the fashion world. And there were all kinds of characters. It was almost like this is where all the people, the fashionistas, the misfits, the odd bunch, everyone comes together and they're in this business. And I loved it. I'm like, I finally found home in a weird way.
Yeah, your tribe.
It was my tribe. And there were people who, who'd been told they couldn't do this or they shouldn't do that, you don't fit in. And I just loved the creativity. People making stuff happen. And I loved it and I didn't leave. My parents got very upset with me. Be careful, parents, what you tell your kids they can do, because it was my mum who got me involved in this modeling malarkey in the first place. And it led to sort of 6 years, me not going to medical school and becoming a photographer, because after 6 years, I said the 80s, right? Mm-hmm. So in the 80s, it was all about the sort of era of the supermodel. There were curvaceous models, there were these Amazonians, Claudia Schiffer, Christy Turlington, Naomi Campbell. And then came along heroin chic, androgyny, Kate Moss, designers, like Anna Sui, Marc Jacobs. It was a very different time. And I'm not a small guy.
Yeah,
I wasn't about to become I played rugby and I did I rode. I wasn't about to become androgynous. So I didn't want to throw away everything I'd ever done the past 6 years, my other degree. And I had always loved photography. And it wasn't until I became a model that I realized that photography was even a career choice.
Yeah.
There was no university degrees in photography back when we were kids. That was new. It was interns and assisting. Yeah. So, I started to transition over, and I could see the industry was changing, and I took that opportunity to not throw away what I'd learned. And I also found and saw photographers similar to yourself, but at that, when I was younger, who I could see weren't just doing photography, but were turning it into a business. Photographers like Fabrizio Ferre, who started super studios in Milan, who then opened industrial super studios in New York, and had a studio business as well as photography business. Mm-hmm. He then started a fashion business called Ferre, which was his clothing line. He then had an airline. He bought an island. I'm like, this is a photographer.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, okay. This is not what you think when you think photographer.
For sure.
A guy called Peter Arnell, who bought all the billboards down Houston Street in New York City. And if anyone wanted to advertise in New York City between Soho and Chelsea on Houston Street, you had to use him or his advertising company to shoot their advertising campaigns. It was like brilliant.
Brilliant.
And I'm like, these are different ways of marketing and branding and doing business within photography. And so I was inspired by these men and these women who were doing these sorts of things. And I tried to put that into my business. And I remember when Top Model came knocking, Tyra had done one season. I wasn't there for season 1. It was on a small network called UPN, which doesn't even exist anymore. And it was a bit of a cult show. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was, done quite well season 1. And she came and said, "Oh, would you, be interested in doing a photo shoot for next season?" And I thought, okay, why not? It's a bit fun. And,
sure.
Reality TV was new, if you can believe it. This is back in 2003. And they actually put everyone on tape back then. And I was on tape, and I think it was partly my British accent, because by all accounts, every reality show cocktail has a dash of English in it.
Of course.
And they liked the way I critiqued the models and what have you. And I got a call a month later. I didn't think I'd got it because it was a month later. And they said, "Look, we've looked at your tape. We like what you do. We'd like you on the show, but would you consider a more permanent role as a permanent judge and a photographer?" And I didn't really know what that meant, but I did know that it was a bit of a risk. And you think now, well, what's the risk? Because obviously I did well out of it. And it's a part of my calling card, But it was a risk because when you work in fashion, especially back then, high fashion and couture in that world that I was in, and editorial photography, being on prime time, being sort of a bit of a sellout perhaps, commercializing yourself, opening the doors of this exclusive fashion club to the world was not a popular thing with people. They were like, "Don't make a mockery of what we do. We're not prime time." And I knew that was that risk. And people warned me. But I also thought, and I could feel it, that times were changing. And I think being in touch with the zeitgeist of the time is very important. And I could see that people loved these kinds of shows. And I'm like, you know what? Sod it. This is about a pop culture, and I want to be a part of it. And I enjoyed that kind of feeling. And so I took the risk. And one season, for me, led to 18 seasons that I did. It became the #1 show on prime time on a Wednesday night. We syndicated to 156 countries around the world and had a weekly viewership of over 100 million people watching our show. We were the #1 television export out of the US for several years, beating both Baywatch and Sesame Street. Ooh. Sorry, Grover. But, it was something,
It's real. Yeah.
And it was real. It became a real deal. And there was a whole generation of fashionistas and young photographers who grew up who, saw what we did on that show and were inspired to take up the camera. Who knew that I would be here, like 20 years later, and now everybody has a camera on their phone and they're all fascinated with the world of photography.
I think that your story is fascinating because of all of the little decisions that you had to make.
Yep.
Like that you wanted to move from modeling into photography, that when photography was happening, you realized that it was changing. And then when it was changing, you decided actively that you were going to risk the thing that was the sure, which is being a part of this fashion community, with the unknown. So there's just a series of probably 20 decisions that have shaped your career. So if I'm going to go back and tap into a couple of those little anecdotes along the way, What was it about being a model that you feel like helped you be a better photographer?
So it's funny, I actually didn't like modeling. And it's ironic because I'm constantly talking to people about becoming models and helping them be models and things, but I really just didn't love it.
Yeah.
I kind of always felt awkward.
Because it was boring, or because there's a lot of standing around if you don't know? But.
There was a bit of standing around. No, that wasn't the main reason. I actually felt a little silly, to be honest. I'll be real straight up with you.
Yeah.
I just felt uncomfortable. And maybe it's the control in me.
Yeah.
I'm quite controlling. Probably very controlling if I talk to some people.
Yeah.
But, and so when you're not in control of your life and you're at the whim of someone else telling you what to do, or the whim of someone else booking you or hiring you, it is not, didn't make me feel comfortable. And I didn't like just being arm candy. And to be honest, the fashion industry for male models, you are not the lead. You're always the sort of secondary. You're hired as a prop.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't fulfilling for me. But I did love the role that the photographer had, or the creative director had, or the editor-in-chief had, the designer had. And I'm like, well, which one of these can I do?
Yeah.
Where is my potential here? And I saw the photographers, and I remember as a model, what I learned specifically was watching how all these different photographers, I worked with hundreds over the years, and some of the biggest names in the business, how they treated me, how they talked to me, how they treated the people on their set, their team, how they worked a job, and their finesse or their charm or their lack of it, or, and whether they got booked again, whether I got booked again, the way they lit their sets, to every aspect of it.
Yeah.
The whole production, and not just from one photographer that, that I could have assisted, but sort of several hundred. And it was very interesting, the reaction, and certain photographers, what they got out of me because of the way they talked to me. And I incorporated that into my style.
Insanely valuable. That's like a crash course that you cannot possibly build on purpose. That has to happen from you you're deconstructing the best successes of every set that you've ever been on, right?
I do some quirky things, there's no doubt, as a photographer now. And I'm not apologetic about it. Some people even laugh at me, or even I know have spoken to my assistants and say, does he always do that? Mm-hmm. And they're like, yes, he does, but there's a reason for it. And it's just let him do his thing, because ultimately there isn't one route to getting the job done.
For sure.
You can all do it your own different ways, and as long as if you create something that is beautiful and it's authentic and it moves you, and it's arrests people when they see an image, then you've done your job. How you got there is kind of up to you,
totally.
really.
The thing it's locked right here. This is the thing. How you got there.
Like a chef.
Yeah.
I mean, how many ways can you cook something? But there are different ways, and it can taste different, but it can still potentially be the same thing, right? I do things like, and it's from my modeling days, I always get into my own lights, and I feel the light. I stand where the model is, and I really kind of embrace what that look feels like. I also look and see what is the model looking at.
Yep.
Because I'm looking at them.
Totally.
They look gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they're on a beautiful background, because this is my scenery. And I'm like, oh, everything's stunning. Like, why isn't this working? And you look for what they're looking at, and half the time, first of all, they're looking at me, which isn't always that great. And then second of all, they're looking at a whole team of people staring at them, picking them apart. And it could be a parking lot, or it might not be what I'm looking at. Yeah. So it's all of us, you really require them to be actors, but they're not actors. So therefore, you have to motivate them. So there are all these sorts of things that I start to think about, and I try to involve. And so there's a simpatico kind of thing. I empathize with them, and I'm like, okay, let me put myself in your shoes.
So powerful.
We all have our own quirks, and some people never do that. I know that there are photographers who would never be photographed or don't like it. But I'm like, if I'm going to do it to you, I better be okay having it done to me.
Well, I think that works for probably lots of careers and lots of ways and angles, but I think that specifically, we share this, you don't know this about me yet, but to me I have a very short modeling career, mostly in sports on the other side of the camera, but one of the obsessions that I have is like a tidy set.
I could tell, by the way.
Okay.
I could tell by the way you walked.
What?
That you used to have a modeling background. They all think they can hide it. They can always tell.
It's a short stint, but not just. But we all have the things that you. What I loved is that you're not apologetic about it. Like this is the thing, and it is what you learn as on both sides of the camera, just being on hundreds of sets, is that how you get there becomes your thing, and the fact that you're empathetic for the model might create or draw out of them something that some other photographer can't get. I'm like the fact that this is about as messy as I'll let my set get. Right here, there's a bag over there, and there's a couple.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, because to me, when I look at just stuff strewn all over the place, it creates anxiety. So we'll hide it in a different place. I want everyone to feel like this is a space that feels good when you're into it. And it's sure this photograph needs to look good, but the whole place has to feel good.
Yeah, no, I have OCD, I think. I mean, it comes down to my assistants know that the wires on the ground, the cables leading away from my lights, have to be in lines that are angled, and they have to be taped down.
Talk about the camera operators here.
So
yes, they're laughing. They're laughing.
I can see that.
True.
But and when I take pictures, and this is me, and other photographers out there, I'm not hating on you, but I'm not a big fan of people shooting on the beach when the ocean is going like that in the background.
Yeah.
Or I'm like, what happened? Is there an earthquake?
Yeah.
I don't. Did you fall when you took this picture? That's just me, okay? My horizons are damn straight. I'm all about symmetry, and other people love those pictures. So it's again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. It just drives me nuts.
Well, we are similar in that. I like the fact that I think empathy is a word that is long overdue, and there's a realization in our culture that empathy is one of the, I think, it's going to really help us in the next chapter of culture, because understanding how someone else feels is part of the human equation. So the fact that you've been on this side of the camera before you became a photographer, but now I want to shift gears and talk about how, in particular, what was your first step or series of steps when you're like, okay, cool, I want to go do that. I want to do what that guy or that girl is doing right there. What did you go? Because you mentioned it's not really happening in a 4-year degree nowadays, or things like Creative Live. It didn't exist.
No.
So what did you do, and then what would you recommend for others? And just to be clear, this goes beyond photography. We're talking about photography because that's Nigel's background, as mine as well. But similar is probably true in a lot of things. So
I had to use what was available, I think is the reality of the matter. And I was lucky too, because I was modeling at the time, and so I looked around everyone I was working with, and they were models, right? So there I have this sort of army of good-looking, attractive people who are in the business who want to be photographed.
Yeah.
And one of the hard things most photographers face is, well, who do I photograph? I don't know any models.
Yeah, my friend
Joey.
My
friend will, would you let me take your picture? So that was my paradigm. I was living in Milan, and I actually lived in a building that had hundreds of models living in it. And every day they would come back from work, if they had a job, which most of them didn't, and I would say to them, please don't wipe your makeup off, leave your hair the way the professionals have done it, and we will do portraits, and I will give you the pictures. Because half the time you didn't get the pictures off your job, so they might be 6 months later, and the model's already returned to the US, the Italian tear sheet, and you hope you get the magazine somewhere when you live in Ohio or something, and you're just not going to get it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me at least take a portrait of you. So they all loved it. So they would come in, and I've got to say that most of my original portraits, I think, were nudes of most people, because I didn't have any clothes. They don't let you walk home unless the model steals the clothes. She doesn't come home with the clothing, but she does have the hair and the makeup on. All right, so we're like, okay. And I have these great portraits of these beautiful girls, and including my wife and my sister-in-law, who I met back then 25 years ago in Milan. And every day they'd have different hair and makeup. And we would create these great shots in Milan with these beautiful lighting in these old Italian streets. Very, very simple, black and white mostly. And I was just honing my eye. So that's how that aspect of it started. I built up a portfolio. And I think I figured out, I photographed almost 1,000 models in the first 2 years. So I had a huge body of work, very consistent, because it was all very similar scenario, style, lighting, feel. And of course that's important too.
Yeah.
Because, people like to know when they book you, what are they going to get? And of course it doesn't mean you can't do something else. But it does freak people out when they see 100 things and they're like, oh, which one are we going to get today?
Yeah.
So that was where I started. And I've always called things now, and for whatever reason, I call them a series. And it's a sort of a series of an element of my career that's a style that I shot, and a look and a feel. And it changed when I moved to Paris, because the light was different, and the people were different, and the models were different. It was all a bit more chic and chic in Italians, in Italy. And everyone who goes there, they're a little bit more rough and ready and sort of sexy. And Paris was more upscale, and the models started wearing clothes. And it got to England, and everyone was skinny and odd looking. And I went down that road. And I moved to the States. And when I moved to America that I took the risk on myself. I stopped modeling completely. I decided to become the photographer. I was reinventing myself. No one really knew me over there. I'd only done a very little bit of modeling 5 years ago. And I went to the meatpacking district, which in hindsight was brilliant, but then was
scary,
terrifying.
Yep.
And it was the only reason why I went is because it was the only place I could afford to go. And I remember when I first started looking for an apartment, I looked in the Village Voice. I saw an opportunity of an apartment I could be a roommate in, and I went and knocked on the door, and it was right there on 14th and 9th. And I opened the door, and towering above me in suspender belts and heels was this lady who said, "Hi, are you Nigel? Come to see your room." And I was like, "Yes, please, can I have a look at my room?" And I was this young man, and she walked me in. She pulled open this curtain, and then above the bed, and the bed was just a bed with a curtain around it, were handcuffs hanging from the bed top. And I'm like, "Oh, wow,
What am I
that'll
saying?
be your room." And I was like, "Okay." Well, the funny thing is that I ended up staying, and I
No warning signs here.
no warning signs here, right? But living in the fashion industry, I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. This is cool. Let's rock this world. And I got a studio, which was like a 4,000 square foot studio, and models used to show up. There was an active meatpacking plant at the bottom, and they would look and they would say, "Oh, hi, I'm here to see Nigel Barker for a shoot. I think I'm at the wrong place. I must have the wrong number." And I would look out the window and I'd see them, and I'd be like, "No, you're here. Climb over the carcass, come up to the 3rd floor, and don't worry about the speakeasy on the 2nd floor or the club called Hell that's in the basement. I'm up there." And that's how my career started. And by having that space, which was a risk because it cost me money to have the big studio space, but it also allowed me, to shoot whenever I want. And I loved the Andy Warhol factory concept.
Of course, same. Big inspiration for me, yeah.
Just being able to have whatever you want, whenever you do whatever you want, and create whatever you want at any time of the day and night.
Yeah.
I'd throw parties, everyone would come, and then by 2 o'clock in the morning, everyone would be in the mood to get their photograph taken. We'd set up the lights, we'd wheel them out. Yeah. People would be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We start shooting them. Yep. And the parties became well known in New York City, and that was really how I started. It was a lot of fun those days.
Brilliant. Yeah. So there's this very clear transition from model to photographer. You've already shared the story of going from photographer to getting the call at the America's Top Model, but we haven't really talked about the trajectory of the show. So you came on after shooting being a photographer in an episode, and then you went like full on there, being a regular on the show. How was it in the sausage factory of making television? It's very different in real life when you're on set every day and versus what gets manufactured and shown to the world. So give me a little bit of an arc of sort of what was going on in your mind and on the show, and how was it in real life relative to what was being put out on the telly?
It was very exciting, to be honest. It was an exciting time all around. Television was still obviously very popular. Now it's very different. It's changed enormously how people were receiving their content. But the day-to-day was a lot of fun. We really were creating, making people's dreams come true, I think is the way to describe it. A lot of people were interested in the fashion industry. They had been forever. And this was the very first time people were being allowed into it. And I did feel very responsible for the contestants. This was their dream, and they were there and they were willing to try anything. And you felt responsible for them. I always sort of joke that I was sort of loco parentis, which means I was basically their parent or guardian on set, and I always had that feeling for them. I think too because I used to be one of them.
Yeah.
And so I looked at them and I felt so fragile for them. I'm like, okay, we've got to make sure this is a good experience and that you grow from it. And I do believe that's partly why I was the longest standing judge on the show. I mean, I was there for 80 odd seasons and I saw many other people come and go. And interestingly enough, from a business standpoint, the show, and that risk that I talked about earlier, how it was a risk going on top model, the magazine sponsor was Jane magazine and then Nylon, and then it became 17. The main sponsor for the actual show were things like Walmart, and it then moved to CoverGirl. But they were very commercial. They were it was not high fashion.
Very mass media.
Very mass. And, before that I was working for Paper Magazine. I'd done stuff for Interview Magazine, and I was doing all this sort of cool stuff. Great fashion houses were calling me and asking me to do shoots, and then they stopped. They stopped calling, just like that. And I was like, ooh, okay, ouch. So now what? How do I monetize what I'm doing? How do I turn this into an actual opportunity? And of course, I realized that what I was doing was I was bringing fashion to the masses. I was that voice for them, a voice of reason, an expert in my field. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a bad place to be. Yeah. That's actually a rather good place to be. I don't need to preach to the choir, everyone who's already got the money and in fashion. How about we do something of our own? And what happened, of course, is that the show became so incredibly successful that magazines like Vogue, 10 seasons deep, came knocking. The ones who had to come. The ones who laughed at us and said, oh, you shouldn't do this, that's not right. It's making a mockery of fashion. We don't hang people from bridges. We don't put spiders on people's faces. We don't do photo shoots on water. And, this is all silly stuff. And actually, every single shoot we did on America's Next Top Model was referenced on some fantastic photo shoot that had actually happened in history. And absolutely people put models in balls of glass on the Seine, in Paris, and there are fantastic classic pictures with people with animals, and all that stuff is real. And yes, sometimes hanging from bridges. It doesn't happen every day, but we're making TV, so we make it exciting. Yeah. And so on our show, it does happen every day. This is what could happen. It was the fantasy, which is what fashion is built on anyway. And so 10 seasons deep, Italian Vogue, not just American Vogue, but the hippest, most editorial, cool Vogue there is, Italian Vogue, came on as our magazine sponsor. One of the guest judges who sat next to me became Andre Leon Talley, editor-at-large of American Vogue. And we had the likes of, Versace's, Missoni's, and every major designer and supermodel come on as our guest judges for the week. And the whole thing changed dramatically. And I always thought to myself, secretly, I laughed at myself and thought, really? So what, now we're in Vogue? So 10 years later, who's missed the boat? Yeah. Or quite frankly, I think we were perhaps more in Vogue than Vogue was. And they knew it.
Isn't that weird? The same thing could be said, I feel like, if you were just stepping back and saying like that what is not in fashion becomes fashionable. And to me, the folks who are to this day interesting as people, as visionaries, as leaders, just look at Andy Warhol, like he was talking about how art and commerce were fascinating. Like it wasn't just being like so true to art. I think he said the most interesting kind of art is business or something.
That's right.
Some great line like that. And when you can see a handful of examples of people who are constantly reinventing themselves, they're actually setting the trend, even at the time where it's very painful for others to follow. Like, oh, they're crazy, what are they doing? And I think the same could be said in basically any industry if you look at people who are doing things that are sort of renegade. What I want to tap into and ask, this has been great storytelling, but did you know, or did you realize that there was a small chance that it could go like this, but you were willing to risk it anyway?
I think it was a bit of both. It was definitely a bit of both. There were times when you didn't know, and you had to shake the dice a little bit. But, you have to also know what you're gambling with. And you have to be ready to ante up, and you have to also be ready to leave the table. So there are moments where you're like, okay, I've done this. I've made some good money. I've done what I needed to do. Time to move. And it's very difficult when you're doing really well, actually. And there was a time, of course, when I actually was fired off my show, off America's Next Top Model. I got fired. And it was painful. With hindsight, I may have left earlier, actually. The funny thing is that a week later, I got a job offer from Naomi Campbell and The Face. And she asked me to host her show. And I went straight in without even a break in hosting her show for 2 years. And it was complicated to do because Naomi was not good friends with Tyra at the time or any of that kind of business. But actually, it was an eye-opener for me. And again, further cemented my position as being someone who was on television talking about the business once again. No, you don't always know, and you do have to take risks. But every single time that something comes up like that, you've got to do your best. You've got to try your hardest. You've got to be as smart as possible. And if you're not enjoying it, that's another part of it. Yeah. I mean, I'm incredibly passionate about everything. And I don't take up anything just and do a little bit of it. I'm like, no, I'm either 100% in or I'm not in at all, And I feel that about life in general,
Well, I have the same experience, and I think we were laughing before we started the cameras rolling about how historically photography wasn't about giving away all of your trade secrets because that was the thing that the business was made on, and not dissimilar to you. I saw where this world was going and said, wait a minute, information wants to be free, and this is all going to be common knowledge soon. So let's start telling stories about what it's like and start, providing a vehicle for other people to tap in. And that, for me and our Creative Live, like that was an ignition point. So I think that this is a very, you've listed two ingredients. One, sort of listening to the industry and looking where it's going, not where it's necessarily been, and also this secondary piece that you just filled in for us of passion. So is there some particular magic third ingredient? Because you have to know an industry well enough to step into it. That's what you talked about. Like I knew fashion, I knew photography a little bit, and I could see myself in that role. I was very passionate about it. Is it just those two ingredients, or is there some other third?
What I would say would be with this is that the word passion is interesting because it's you're passionate, and I am passionate, and I'm driven, and I'm competitive, and with myself as well as other people and everything else, right? But I'm also compassionate to myself as well. And that when I say that I love myself, I mean that in the right sense. I mean that it's important to love yourself. You've got to be kind to yourself. You can't be too judgmental. You can't be too tough. You have to know when, I always say, look, just do your best. I may not be as good as you. I may not be as good as the next person, but I tried my best. And I'm proud of that, and that's a big part of life. I think too, if you think you're better than everyone else, of course, there's the word conceited. That's what that is, right? But if, you're okay with, I ran my fastest. I came in second, but I ran my fastest. I couldn't have run faster. Hey, what are you going to do? You're going to beat yourself up about that forever? Doesn't make any sense, right? So giving yourself that opportunity. But when you add these things together, I think for me it was the understanding that I was always going to try my hardest. I was going to put 100% in, 120 if need be. I would be okay with that. And I would, that there's the element of risk as well. With those things, the magic is when all of a sudden something spontaneous happens. And spontaneity, for me, is really the American dream in a way. It's the word freedom. Because only when you are truly free get those two special things happen. And I see it on set all the time. When the magic happens, when something I wasn't expecting, and I'm like, wow, and literally the hair on the back of my neck stands up on end, and I'm like, I just got something really special. And I didn't know that was going to happen. And it was the build-up of all those things, and it's just spontaneous. And it's very hard because you can't bottle spontaneity, but it is allowing spontaneity to happen. So it comes from, I think, a lot of these things, these sort of other attributes that are, if you allow that moment to happen.
Well, there's also, I'll reference another conversation we had before. It's like, it's not just the photograph that makes the photographer. We talk about the end result, yes, but it's kind of, can you get that result over and over and over, because people are betting on you and they have to bet on something that is a known quantity, whether it's being able to look at your portfolio. But you also described how it's in a photographer, or I think you could say this in any career, it's like, it's the total package. It's all of the things that you can bring to that moment. And when I want to have you comment on all of the things that are beyond what people think about when they think of a photographer, like what are the other things that you control for? So that's question one. And then question two, is it in that world that are you really like creating a fertile environment for spontaneity? So question one, like what is it beyond just the photograph that you as a photographer are setting up? You talked about client management or inspiration or the set. So just tell us a little bit of a story of that.
It really, for me, and again, there isn't like there's no
list.
There's no list, or there's no even magic potion, right? I mean, people often say, what 3 things can I do? Or can you give me some advice? I want to do what you do to do with your career. Yeah. Like, it's like, that's just never going to happen. And you may have a better career than me, right? So, but having a team was always been incredibly crucial. I'm the sum of my parts, and my parts, are everyone who works with me and for me and around me, and and I met my wife, as I mentioned earlier, 25 years ago, with her twin sister, and they became my muses. And I had these incredible muses which helped me work and build my portfolio. But my wife and I have also worked hand in glove together for years, and everything I do, every shoot that I do, her fingerprint is on it as much as mine. And many of my photo assistants have been with me for a decade and 12 years and another 15 years. And, and everything they do, it's a part of the DNA of what I do.
Yeah.
It isn't just me. Even if sometimes it is me and the model, there's so much that's gone into that. Even my mood that day, even with the mood on set, my hair and makeup artist, with the way they work with people and how they make people feel on, the way the stylists dress people. It's not just having any old team. It has to be this team. And you can't trade people. It's like having your own family. Yeah. You can't trade your brothers and sisters because you don't like them today for someone else and say, oh, it's still family. Yep. It's like, no. Even if you don't get on, it's your family. Yeah. And these people become your family. And some days they rub you up the wrong way. Other times you love each other to death. And when you don't see each other, you miss one another. Yeah. And it was that team, I think, was the secret sauce. And hey, you know what? You can build your own team. It doesn't have to be my team. Yeah. That was the team that worked for me. And that's the wonderful thing. And I think most great people I know have wonderful people around them. And they're good at delegating. Yeah. They need to know how to do that. And they need to know how to manage people too, as well as themselves, and have people there to manage them. I always say you have got to speak to the boss, and I direct them to my wife. I'm like, if she doesn't approve or she's not going to do it. And I remember people like photographers like Helmut Newton. His wife worked all his photo shoots. She picked the models, she set up the ideas and the concepts, and he went and shot them. And people often will credit Helmut for everything, but actually his wife was very instrumental.
The same is true for me, by the way. Kate has been absolutely critical in every element of my career, and I try and recognize her as you do, your wife, of 25 years, same, 25 years.
Amazing, congratulations.
So if it's fair to say it's the total package. You talked about team, you talked about the environment, we've already talked about what it feels like on set, so those are the parameters. Now, is it all of those things that gets to culminate in this magic moment, the serendipity, or is there some other magic that you're trying to infuse in the moment? Because that's the thing that people, I think when they're listening to you right now, they're like, yeah, but how do I get, where's the zhuzh? How do I get that thing?
The zhuzh is inspiration, probably, and that is a love of life. You have to appreciate life. You have to literally wake up in the morning and be willing and open to be inspired. People say to me all the time, "Oh, what happens if you're not inspired, or you don't know what to do, you don't know how to shoot it?" And I'm like, I literally I get a bit stuck with that question, because I'm like, I don't really know, because I literally wake up and I'm inspired by the rain, I'm inspired by the smell of cooking. I'm inspired by the color of things around me. I'm someone's story, and good or bad. I mean, I love New York City because it's dirty and smelly and stinky. That actually inspires me, because how can you sing the blues unless you have the blues? So there's, and what a beautiful music the blues is.
Yeah.
And like most great love songs are of heartbreak, not of actually, being in love. So you need the pain as well as as the nice side of life. And heck, I hate to say it, but it's one of the reasons why I never moved to LA. I love Los Angeles, but every time I'm there, I'm like, hey, maybe I'll just hang here in the garden today.
Because it's so easy.
It's so nice. And I'm like, I go back to New York and I'm like,
it's snowing today.
It's tough and everyone's pushing and stressed, but then I do my best work. And I got to say, some of my best shoots have been when I've had a hangover. So, hey, it happens. There are sometimes that pain and that you have to push through. And it's being inspired. And if you're not inspired, of course, it's difficult to do anything. But I feel very inspired all the time. Everything. I listen to small things. Drops of water in the shower, the noise, music, anything. I love music. I love colors. I go out, I see the Seattle sky, and people are like, oh, it's great. And I'm like, yeah, no, but it could be really emotional, it could be really powerful, it could be really angry, or it could be really soft, it could be really gentle, it's misty, it's like a cream. I'm like, I know that's how I see things. Yeah. And I think that, for me, helps me, in general, have those moments of spontaneity and I see opportunity. I see promise in people. I'm like, I love people. I've done documentaries in Haiti, 2 of them. I've done a documentary in Africa on pediatric AIDS, and I'm fascinated in the human condition and how people in the most adverse of conditions push through, power through, and decide that they're not going to accept this crappy life, and actually they're going to make something of it, even though they've got beyond nothing, lost all their family members and live in a tent city, and a little girl, and she's trying to get educated and go to school every day and trying to make something better for herself. And you see these people and you're like, wow, how can you not be inspired?
Last question, because I've already kept you a couple of minutes longer than I promised. Because he's got to get back to his Creative Live class. We also talked about this before the show, but we never really got to complete our thought, and it's how we've both, as photographers, taken on a lot of other interests, and then we're doing things that transcend the original concept of photography. It's a little bit full circle.
Sure.
Like when you talked about some of the folks that have inspired you, like, wait a minute, these people are doing so many different things. Now with Creative Live, you with your furniture lines and Dog Pound, the gym in New York. What is it about this next aspect of your career that you're most excited about? And what is it? What do the rest of us have to learn from it?
I think it's one of those things. It's a couple of things, right? So some of this started, like you mentioned. I have a furniture line. It's called NB1, and it sells this store called Art Van in the Midwest. And the gym, the Dog Pound, they're very different. I have an investment in this T-shirt company that I'm wearing right now, and I have an investment in a wine company, and all these different things. They're all very diverse. They're things I love, right? They're businesses I love. And also, I thought to myself, as a photographer, I've never waited around for people to hire me. I've never said, I hope I get a job this year, and who's going to hire me? I literally go to people and say, you should hire me. This is what I would do for you. This is how I feel your campaign should look. And if they can't afford to pay me, I'll say, okay, how about this? I'll take a bet. Or they don't want to pay me. Or I decide I don't want to be paid, which is another thing.
Yep.
I'm like, look, how about I take a slice of your business? I will shoot everything. I'll handle your marketing and your advertising, and I'll turn it around for you. And this is what we're going to do, and this is the plan. And utilizing everything I have, my celebrity and my social media and everything else, and my talent as a photographer to tell these stories. And it's been a very interesting kind of business decision. And I remember with Art Van specifically, I was brought on as a photographer to shoot their catalogs and campaigns. And I remember talking to Mr. Van himself at a meeting, and he says, so Nigel, what do you see for our, what would you like to do for us? What's your vision? And I looked at him and I said, well, you know what I'd really like to do is my own furniture line. And he looked and he literally went, pfft. laughed and went, no, I don't mean, I mean, what do you see as far as shooting our current campaign? And I'm like, yeah, no, I know that's what you meant, but I want my own furniture line. And he looked at me and said, okay, young man, and he was in his 90s, like, okay, young man, can we just get back on track? And anyway, 2 years later, he came to me and he said, you know what? We sell Kathy Ireland, we sell Cindy Crawford. They're both models. I don't see why a photographer who shoots models and actually creates the imagery shouldn't have his own line of furniture. Are you still interested? And I'm like, I was hoping you'd come round. And here we are now, several years deep into it, and I love it. We have over 200 and something SKUs and travel the world with them making this furniture and photograph it. I work with all these great designers, and it's become a love of mine. And I've always loved creating. Mm-hmm. It's being creative, whether it's the gym and creating a look and a feel for that, and the organic nature of how that started, a group of friends working out together, whether it's a t-shirt company where I felt there was a hole in the market in a certain age group of men who leave college, but like a certain look but can't afford another one, and here's that right price point for them, and filling that hole, to a wine company where in a world of wine which is so saturated, where it's so kind of pompous, people don't understand it, they don't know the words to describe it, they just know that they like it, and I meet some cool, fun New Zealanders who created a wine, and the warning label on the wine bottle says, be careful, could contain traces of bloody good wine. And I thought, that's me.
Those are my people.
Those are my people. Let's have some fun, And so I look for ventures and opportunities like that. But it's really about people who are willing to shake it up, take a risk, and be creative.
It's really hard to end on anything but that. We've gone a little bit over. Super happy to have you on the show, man.
Thanks,
Thank
brother.
you so much. And now, we got to go get a drink. I'm sorry that's not going to be filmed, but I appreciate it. You know how to find Nigel. You're just at Nigel Barker everywhere on social, right?
Yeah.
Track him down, give him a shout out when you see this, and we'll see you again probably